Hey guys, I'm Gabe. This is my co-host Elijah here at Franchise Tagged, and today we are going to be talking about the Eagles off-season. So, real quick, first, there's comments down below. He wanted me to shout him out for some reason, but I'm not
Yeah.
entirely sure why. Uh, our
Give
Discord,
us what you think the Philadelphia Eagles should do, but listen to the video first, see if your thoughts align and see what you like and what you dislike. Go ahead, let us know how you feel. Eagles fans, drop some comments.
Eagles fans especially, I would like to know if this opinion is shared across more than just general NFL fans, because neither of us are big Eagles guys. Um,
Yeah.
But first, I do want to get into what happened this past season compared to this a season ago, 2022, because the differences are crazy. And the only things that the Eagles really lost were their offensive and defensive coordinators, which we'll get into a little later. But just to go over some raw rankings, the Eagles in 2022 were third in offensive points scored. They dropped to seventh this season. Not too bad. About the same in offensive yards. They went from third to eighth. So offensively, they were about on par, about the same. But in defensive points allowed, they were eighth last season, 30th this season. In defensive yards allowed, they were second last season, 26th this season. And in turnover differential, they were third last season and 27th this season. Point differential, third and 15th. Yardage differential, first and 16th. And margin of victory from 7.8 to 0.3. So,
Yeah, that's substantial. And it's odd to me that like the thing that we kind of saw all year that we were breaking down weekly of like, oh, their offense has no identity doesn't really show up here. They're still top 10 in yards and points, but like the eye test wasn't good.
no,
Even though the stats kind of lean towards a more positive outlook than how we felt.
yeah, the stats definitely lean towards the defense being the biggest problem there. But I think that a stat that kind of encapsulates all of it, and the one that I mainly want to focus on, is their turnover differential. Because everything fell off, everything got worse, but turnover differential was huge. They went from top 3 in the league to bottom 5 in one season. So
Yeah.
the only teams that were somewhat successful that had a turnover differential as bad as the Eagles were the Chiefs and Browns. And neither of them had great regular seasons, but both of them made the playoffs as well. And the Chiefs have put it together in the playoffs and kind of figured things out and fixed that problem.
Yeah.
And the other thing about those two teams was, oddly enough, punts. So if you think about those two teams, they have good defenses. The Chiefs and Browns both have amazing
Yeah.
defenses, just not in forcing turnovers. They're not huge takeaway threats. The Browns
Yeah.
ranked first in the league in punts forced. So they forced more punts than any other team. So their defense was suffocating the other team, just not taking the ball away. They were getting the ball back just through punts. And then the Chiefs were eighth, and the Eagles in that stat ranked 30th. So they weren't getting the ball back through takeaways or through punts. The other teams that weren't getting the ball back through takeaways were getting it back by getting stops on defense. So basically, the Chiefs and Browns didn't have a great turnover differential, but their defense was getting them the ball back at a very good rate, just not with the high, like the big splash plays with takeaways and such. The
Yeah, no momentum shifters, but I mean, getting a 3 and out or just overall having a drive end without score, like, yeah, they were doing their job there. Eagles definitely not.
It's not like it's not a massive momentum swing, but getting the ball back at all, stopping a team, is still momentum gained where the Eagles weren't getting any.
Mm-hmm.
Last season, the Eagles were third in turnover differential and 27th this year. And just to go into the physical stats of that, they had 27 takeaways and 19 giveaways last year, and 18 takeaways to 28 giveaways this year. So
Yeah.
both stats kind of flipped. And
Yeah.
I think that can kind of explain all of the Eagles' struggles. They're a run-first offense that can't run the ball because they're constantly playing from behind because their defense can't get stops and their offense gives the ball away. So,
Yeah. Jalen Hurts had an especially like messy year. in regards to those like turnovers and fumbles and just any way he could give the ball up, it was getting given up. It felt like.
Yeah.
But
the other thing is the Eagles weren't used to adversity, which is something they faced a lot of this year with that defense struggling. So last season they were used to offense runs up the score and then they run the ball and 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 then the game's over. And this season,
and the defense just has to like put their heads down, pass rush, because they know that, okay, they're from behind. They got, they got to come back 14, 21 plus points. So we're going to go ahead and just get after the quarterback because we know that they're probably not going to be running in this situation. But as soon as they weren't having those huge margins, they kind of they can't force the next offense, the opposing offense, to be so predictable. So then the defense falls apart, especially with kind of what we'll be getting into after this with those coordinators.
Yeah. Last thing I want to touch on with the stats is that last season, their defense let up around 300 yards and 2 touchdowns a game. And this season, they let up 350 and 3 touchdowns a game on average. So that's an extra 7 points. And, the yards are whatever. But that's some extra momentum that they're giving up. And maybe the difference between field goal range and not field goal range a couple times a game. So,
yeah.
It's
nothing we have, but I'd be interested in seeing what the possession looked like, because those 50 yards, that's time of possession to me, that's the offense still, the opponent having the ball longer. So
yeah,
then that even more so forces the Eagles to go pass as opposed to run.
Mm-hmm. The secondary got older, the secondary got worse, and that showed heavily. And then their defense also let up the 3rd most points of any team this season. So again, offense was consistently just needing to score, and the defense didn't do that much in 2022. So this year it was a lot of close games, where last year it was a lot of run up the score and then just maintain the lead, control the clock.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to get into the coaching staff of last year, can do that.
Yeah, so that's probably the biggest change. I mean, as you said, they retained a lot of the roster. They made sure to re-sign a lot of people. And the one thing they can't really do that for is some coordinators that were leaving for head coaching jobs. So Shane Steichen left to head over to the Colts, and Jonathan Gannon went to Arizona. And Gannon was kind of someone who he had been kind of blasted by fans during the Super Bowl because they blamed him for the loss because of his defensive scheme, in the clutch wasn't great. But when you just look at like the teams and how they improved with their coordinators, I'll start with Steichen because he's the more impactful one in terms of improving their team. He went over to the Colts. Then the Colts had ranked 10th in points this year and 15th in yards, which, it's not exactly 7 and 8 like the Eagles were, but the Eagles are a much more talented team. I mean, if you had to compare first just some top guys from the Eagles, A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, and then you look at the same kind of positions in the top snap getters, we have the stash. We got Minshew, Mania, Josh Downs, and like Michael Pierce, who was also kind of hurt.
Pittman.
Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman. There's the mix up. Yeah. But Steichen, he went to this position. He got a top quarterback in the draft, and that top quarterback did not play majority snaps for the team. So the fact that they were kind of, top half of the league, when I feel like it wouldn't have been unreasonable to kind of write them off.
Yeah, as
soon as they saw their quarterback go down.
I was gonna say the Eagles and Colts ranked for the most part pretty similarly in their offensive rankings, and the Eagles had a roster that everybody was saying is Super Bowl ready and going to make a run this year, and the Colts were rebuilding. So for them to have the same statistics, I don't know if it says more about Shane Steichen than it does about how incompetent Brian Johnson is, but
yeah. And And that's not to mention some other like woes that Steichen had, where outside of the quarterback, Jonathan Taylor, he held out for 4 weeks, and yeah, he's holding out for 4 weeks, and then he's also not coming back true to form, because even after 4 weeks of holdout, it took another 3 weeks for him to see double-digit carries. So he's still entering a whole different scheme than he's used to as a Colt. It's not like he's like, oh yeah, I know this playbook and I'm gonna get right back into it. He still needed to get up to speed. They took a lot of injuries. They saw Alec Pierce play as wide receiver 2, and you talk a lot more highly about Alec Pierce than I do.
Yeah, he's decent.
He's not wide receiver 2 decent, but decent. Yeah. They also missed Josh Downs for a period of time, so it's just like all of these problems mounted for the Colts that could have just derailed the season and kind of led to that, as I said, writing off. But they stayed in it. They ranked top of the league, or not top of the league, but top half of the league in those stats. And meanwhile, you have the Eagles, who they have so much more talent, being ranked pretty similarly, as you said, that if they had at all the amount of, as you had stated, like adversity, they went through adversity this year, but if they had the same amount of adversity as the Colts and they missed Jalen Hurts for the entire year, they're not coming close to the playoffs. If Devontae Smith misses half the year, they could, but I mean, he was 1,000-yard contributor for them and a spark plug. Yeah, it's definitely a worry, I'd say, that they would miss playoffs, missing him for half the year.
Yeah, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were definitely 1A, 1B in that offense, not necessarily 1 and 2. And the other thing that I want to touch on that I don't think you have written down here, but Zach Moss, for the first few weeks of the season, looked insane. Like, he looked elite for the first few weeks. And I didn't think they were going to sign Jonathan Taylor, because I was like, why would they? They've got Zach Moss. He's doing great. And for a guy like Shane Steichen to go in and completely change an offense and make Zach Moss look like an elite running back, no shade to Zach Moss, but just in Buffalo, he wasn't that crazy. Like, he didn't look that crazy. I think he was in Buffalo.
I think so as well.
Fact check myself right now.
I think him and Singletary left, I want to say.
Zach Moss. Yeah, Bills. He was okay, but he wasn't anything crazy. And then he goes to the Colts, and he's all of a sudden running for 150 yards a game. Like,
yeah.
and then obviously Minshew Mania 2.0, 3.0 at this point, is it? I don't know. Who
knows what iteration?
He's a Pro Bowler. Like, he is in the Pro Bowl replacing Patrick Mahomes, because Mahomes is in the Super Bowl. So
yeah,
for that to happen, for those guys to look as good as they did, I think that says a lot about Steichen.
Yeah. And then kind of flip into that other side where Gannon did not succeed on the Cardinals, at least on his side of the ball. They ranked 31st in points allowed for the defense and 25th in the yards allowed.
I want you to name me one player on that defense without Google.
Buda Baker.
You're right. Name me one more.
But Buda missed like the first month of the year. I think he played week 1 and then missed 5 more. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, outside of Buda, yeah, and that says all you need to know about the Cardinals. So I wouldn't have exactly pinged them as being a top defense heading into the year, and we had them pinned as the worst team heading into the year, and they are pretty darn close to it. So yeah, defensively, Gannon didn't improve them very much, but also you look at what the defensive drop off from the Eagles, and I think that they would have loved to have him instead of Matt Patricia, or who was the defensive coordinator before they even changed to Patricia?
I don't even remember.
Can't remember his name right now.
Oh, Sean Desai.
Yeah.
I don't know. He was fired halfway through the year and replaced with Matt Patricia. Yeah. So
he wasn't fired. He was downgraded. He stayed in the booth for them.
Just a small tangent. I don't know if it's evident. I'm a Patriots fan. He's a Lions fan. So we both have our fair share of Matt Patricia knowledge. And the sheer like depths of needy you need to be at to call on Matt Patricia and say, Matt,
Yeah, right.
Mr. Patricia, come save our season, please.
Matthew, please.
So yeah.
Yeah. They didn't get any better with him. Shocking. But yeah, Matt Patricia is who you turn to. I think they would have loved to have kept Gannon.
Yeah.
Just the drop off is insane. And so yeah, Gannon didn't do too much. But as we said, we can only name Buda Baker from that team. And you throw in the fact that offensively he missed Kyler, so there's just so much like, okay, we're going to be kicking off, we're going to be punting so often because our offense isn't going to be that productive. Our defense is going to be on the field so much. They're going to be giving up a lot of yards. They're going to be giving up a lot of points. But yeah, I'd say that if they managed to retain Gannon, they would have done a lot better. If they managed to retain Steichen, they would have done a lot better. It's not that necessarily that they lost both of them, is the problem. Because if they had kept one, I think they would have been in so much better of a spot. But yeah, no. And that leads to kind of the next section here of how they saw that they sucked this past season and they're making immediate changes. You want to get into that?
Yeah, after this season, they basically cleaned house. They fired a bunch of people. The ones that matter to the average fan are the coordinators, offensive and defensive. They fired some assistant coaches and some positional coaches as well, but those are less known names, so we won't really get into them. But they fired Brian Johnson and Matt Patricia and replaced them with Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. Vic is basically a home run hire. He was rumored to go to them last season, and then it kind of fell through, and he went to the
Miami
Dolphins, yes, where he did make their team better on defense. It wasn't a ton, but he did improve points wise. They went from being 24th to 22nd. Then yards wise, they went from 18th to 10th. Turnover differential, they went from 28th to 12th. So that's a huge jump. Point differential from 14th to 5th. And then for yardage differential, 5th to 2nd. And margin of victory, last season they had a negative 0.1 point differential is basically what margin of victory is. And then this season it was 6.2. And the point differential, the yardage differential, and the margin of victory stats are all heavily helped by the offense and by dropping 70 points in a game. So there's, how much can you
There's some bias on those. Fangio? Yeah.
But this, when Jalen Ramsey came back, and this isn't like a statistic, I don't have any statistics to back this up, but when Jalen Ramsey came back for like the next 4 or 5 weeks, that defense was elite. And what Fangio was doing with it was very interesting, and the impact that Jalen Ramsey had was very interesting as well. And I think it was just for the first part of the season, it was just a lack of superstar talent on that defense, and then towards the end of it, it was a lot of that superstar talent getting hurt. They lost a couple edge rushers, and they lost a bunch of just pieces to the defense.
Yeah, they needed to sign 2 edge rushers prior to the playoff game to really even stand a chance at generating a pass rush. So yeah, they were hurting.
Yeah. So they still did improve in their defensive metrics, and anybody, literally a guy off the street, is better than Matt Patricia. So this is a great move to go from a guy like Patricia to a guy who is well regarded as Vic Fangio.
The annoying guy at your watch party who's like, yeah, I could have, I could be doing that. I could do that. And they could do it better than Matt Patricia could.
And then Kellen Moore, he's a little bit more of a head scratching hire, where their offense didn't really drop off that much. But when he went from what was it, the Cowboys to the
Dallas
Chargers
to LA.
Yeah. When he made that move, the Chargers didn't look great this season. And I will give him the benefit of the doubt with no Justin Herbert for 4 games and no Mike Williams for 14 games. and then
Yeah.
drop issues from Quentin Johnston. Him putting together any semblance of a successful offense is kind of impressive. And, you know, he had Easton Stick looking decent for the last 4 games of the year. But he also couldn't really score against a Raiders defense that dropped 63 points on their head. And, you know, the other bad things that he was part of was his inability to make the Chargers successful before Herbert's injury, and his misutilization of Quentin Johnston, who is kind of known to not be a big deep ball, like one-on-one threat. And yet deep is how they used him. They just kind of threw him in that Mike Williams role, and he's not Mike Williams, but they tried to make him Mike Williams, and it didn't work, and it led to a lot of drops. And a lot of it is on Johnston and his inability to catch the ball, but it's a misuse of talent by Kellen Moore. And
yeah. Last thing I had to say about Kellen Moore was, like, he was forced out of, you know, Dallas. Like, it definitely seemed like Mike McCarthy made the call of, like, all right, you're leaving, so I can stay. And the Cowboys improved statistically. They improved with McCarthy calling plays instead of Moore. And there was, like, this argument at the end of the end of last season, prior to him going to LA, that, like, he had some predictable play calling tendencies, and that was kind of what was holding him back. And I'd say that with the transition and seeing that the stats improved under McCarthy, then maybe that was right. Maybe that's true. Maybe he had that predictability, and that allowed them to kind of enter this new thing and be performing better. But yeah, it's like there's so many factors with his LA stint that we really don't know to the full extent where the issues kind of arise. I mean, Herbert was, like, wrapping his hand for a good portion of the year after his injury. So it could be that, his throwing was just slightly off because of that. But, like, we're going to give benefit of the doubt a little bit for this move, but it's still a little bit of a head scratcher, and I'd say more of a lateral move than a outright improvement.
The only improvement is in name value, because you recognize the name Kellen Moore a lot more than you do Brian Johnson. And predictable is not what the Eagles need. So if that is a genuine concern, if he is calling predictable plays, that's not what the Eagles need. And Nick Sirianni's going to need to get on top of that and actually step in and do something. Which I guess, if we're talking about current coaches, we do need to kind of get into Sirianni and the fact that he may have lost the locker room. And I don't know if this, like, hey, let's clean house, let's get rid of the coordinators, is his final, like, reach to the players of, no, guys, I really am, you know, you can trust me. I am good. Look, I got rid of the problems. I'm good. I promise. But the problem is that Jalen Hurts had to be the adult. I don't know if you saw that post floating around when Sirianni was, like, yelling at Chiefs fans and at the Chiefs and everything. And Jalen Hurts had to, like, take his hand down and, like, be the adult in the scenario. And Jalen Hurts went from Bama, where he has, like, the most,
tenured, like,
Bama to Oklahoma,
disciplined coach.
But yeah, Bama to Oklahoma, where, you know, I'm sure the coach at Oklahoma was also disciplined, and then to Philly. So it's probably just a situation that Jalen doesn't really want to be in either. And if that stays, if Sirianni ends up really being the problem, they could be in for a rough 2024. But that all remains to be seen. And then going into the offseason, if you want to get into this.
Yeah, we'll jump into that 2024 that we're speaking on. The Eagles are in an interesting spot because they are losing, not quite, obviously. They still can extend these guys, they can sign them, but they're losing a lot of contributors. They're losing a starting running back in DeAndre Swift, who could take a hometown discount given the kind of lack of running back contracts getting thrown around these days, but we could see that. They're going to be losing some veterans on the D-line with Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. Zach Cunningham, Shaq Leonard, and Brandon Mann are also some of the starters they're losing, but they're also losing several wide receivers. Boston Scott, backup quarterback role, backup running back role, some O-linemen. Like, it's it's a long list of people who were getting snaps for the team and or just like a backup at an important role like quarterback. Then they're going to be pretty thinned out. And right now they have a cap space of 18 million, not the you know stingiest amount to have, but they will definitely need to be able to generate some starters with their draft picks. And with the 18 mil, they could also free up a lot of money. Jason Kelsey, of course, is undecided on his move, if he's retiring, if he's coming back. So if he retires, that's going to save them 12 mil. They traded for Kevin Byard, and he could be cut after June 1st, I think, and save them a lot of money. No, I have that backwards. They traded for Kevin Byard, and they could cut him and save 13 mil. The one that they can cut after June 1st is Avonte Maddox. Cutting him after June 1st saves them 7 mil. So with just a few cuts, maybe with Jason, we don't know, but they could be upwards of $39 million in cap. And that would definitely give them the money to kind of re-sign these important guys leaving. DeAndre, and I'd say at least one of the D linemen there, because of that veteran mentality. You want to kind of keep the culture in place. You don't want these young Georgia Bulldogs running all over the place there. But it's a system that we need to see how everything goes, because they got worse at the corner position. They need to stay strong in the front seven at least. So they need to kind of bring those guys back or hit on some guys through the draft to kind of improve there. And then we need to also see how this whole coaching situation pans out, because, with how they looked the past 2 months of the regular season, you would assume that their Super Bowl window is closed. They lost the locker room. Everyone's just deflated, and they're not going to be making a run next year. But they managed to make some good moves. They hit on the draft pick. They bring some people back after making some cap casualties. And those new coordinators pay off because they completely cleaned house. Maybe they do make it back to playoffs.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Everything is kind of up in limbo right now. There's nothing that's set in stone. Everything is, well, we've seen this team perform to the highest of their abilities and lead the NFL in, record. We've also seen them suck and lose to the Buccaneers and the Giants in back-to-back weeks. And, shout out Giants and Bucks, but damn. So it all really just depends on which Eagles we get next year. If it's, the Eagles we saw when they made their Super Bowl run, or if those Eagles have aged out and the difference makers were all veterans and they've lost their playing time is done and their peak has been reached. So everything on paper, it's a really rough spot for the Eagles to be in, but all hope is not lost, I think is where the last thing I have to say about it.
Yeah, I've seen the argument that okay, with these coaching hires, they're back, they're going to be going right. They're not. They've fallen too far for just the simple, offensive coordinator hiring, defensive coordinator hiring to be cut and dry the difference. They've lost so much momentum, so much confidence. I think that they suffered most in the locker room. It's not that they suffered, their record. No, they were fine. They made playoffs. They suffered in the locker room, their mentality, kind of their drive to go in on Sunday and perform at this level every week. So, I feel like even just, you talk about Jason Kelsey, after last season, there was no, I didn't think at all he was going to retire. He's going to get right back into the grind. But after this collapse of the team, he can retire. It's not out of my belief that he could just be hanging it up. I'm not doing that again.
Other problem
Anything
real
else you
quick
want to add?
before we end it off is the other veterans on their team that need to be re-signed or that might retire just straight off the active roster. So they've gone and built an amazing blend of older and younger players, but if those older players feel like their window has passed and they're like, I'm just going out there to destroy my body for another 8 and 9 season, why would I do this? And they just hang up the cleats.
Yeah.
So it is all in limbo. But as of right now, I am not confident in the Eagles' future in the league.
Yeah. They have a lot of building to do before I think that they go back to being 1 seed Super Bowl contender type of guys that we were talking about entering this season, them being.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely let us know your thoughts in the comments. Let us know if you agree, if you think that they are going to make a kind of bounce back year, and why, if you do think that. And then
Yeah, explain yourself, please.
let us know who you want to see them take in the first round. They do have the 22nd overall pick. That's been confirmed for a couple weeks, and we'll probably have a mock draft coming out pretty soon after the Super Bowl. And I would like to get some information on who would go to the Eagles in the most likely position. I think they're going DB. That's one of their biggest needs. But
Yeah,
that's
that's where
just
I'd lean to.
that's just me. Yeah. So definitely let us know.
That's just two non-Eagles fans, so let us know. Yep.
And then if you're interested in keeping up with us, definitely hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell, and follow our Twitters. We do some updates there every now and then, and join the Discord for sure.
For sure. And with that, I am saying deuces.
Deuces.